You know, I never thought I'd see the Defenders of Earth united and fighting as one. Your mother and father would be proud.
Hey everybody, it's Hannah Saulic, the head of video here at CinemaBlend, with Sean O'Connell, our managing editor and author of the Release the Snyder Cut book, and we have made it. We are about to break down the epilogue of Zack Snyder's Justice League, full of spoilers. And yeah, there's a lot to get to, I know.
I know more than you can possibly imagine.
This has been a marathon breaking down this 4-hour cut of Justice League.
And like barely scratching the surface too, in a way.
Yeah, and then it's even like, this has been fascinating because things that we have asked questions about like have been answered. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this feels like one of those projects that information about it is going to constantly just still be bleeding out, especially as Zack makes the press rounds and reveals certain things. So we'll get into some of that because, full disclosure, we're recording this episode shortly after Vanity Fair dropped a huge explanation of the ending. And so we'll touch on some of that in our conversations as we break down the epilogue. And then maybe, I don't know, Hannah, should we do another breakdown video of all that's revealed?
I think we might have to. And maybe there will be some Restore the Snyderverse news to cover as well. We'll just have to see.
All right, well, let's get back to the epilogue. Where do we even begin?
We start with, it's Silas's kind of like VO closing montage, which in theatrical cut, we had something similar, but it was Lois Lane in a completely different speech. So what were your thoughts just on that overall? Yes.
Right, a piece she wrote for the Daily Planet. Mm-hmm. I think it's really beautiful.
Let me speak to you from my heart, not as a scientist, as a father. Your father twice over.
The themes of parenting, you know, and fathers and sons specifically, but mothers and their children as well too, is so relevant to all of this story. And obviously it's coming from such an emotional place for Zack. So, you know, I thought this was a great way to sort of button up the epilogue. It was nice for Victor to having now come to terms with who he is and not quite rejecting the, you know, he viewed himself as a monster essentially at the beginning of the movie. And we get to that great moment when he's at his parents' graveside where he sheds the hoodie, you know, that he hides behind and embraces who he is, a cyborg. Great monologue from Joe Morton as the late Silas Stone.
I love him.
Yeah.
On a side note.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And so, I thought this was a really cool way to tie up some plot threads from everybody's and get to the strong parental vibe that goes through all 4 hours of this cut.
Yeah, I specifically like too with Diana how it kind of teased her really missing the mascara and the way that I think in theatrical cut she just like hands out food off a truck to like some kids and like that's the end of her story. So I like that we got something a little bit more complex for her here.
Return to me, Diana.
Zack confirms in the Vanity Fair article that Lois is pregnant.
I told you.
At the end of this, and indeed the article even goes so far as to mention the bathtub scene.
Oh, it does? I didn't read it yet.
It says that, you know, clearly they must have had some sort of relations during BVS, and the writer, not Zack, but the writer of the article says, remember, there's that bathtub scene in Batman vs. Superman. That might be more important than we initially, you know, grew to realize, kind of thing.
So it does kind of clarify the timeline a little bit, too.
And then I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head with
Congratulations, by the way.
And Zack talks about the fact in that article that this is one of the moments that the studio did not want him to put in or to leave in because it so clearly hints at like story that has to continue. They wanted it to
so that's
have
interesting
closure.
because isn't that scene in theatrical? Well, I guess he doesn't say congratulations in theatrical cut.
I think he just says, I bought the bank.
The whole bank.
It's like a reflex with me, I don't know.
Who else gets some closure? So this is interesting to take into consideration because you have to remember the timeline of where we are in 2017 when this is coming out. Arthur's going back to visit his father, which is supposed to be a baton pass to James Wan's Aquaman film. The thing about Wonder Woman 2 is that we have not seen her next steps in a contemporary world, right? Like we got her origin story movie and then we got Wonder Woman 1984. This very much shows if they're going to continue her journey from where she is here. You know, she's very clearly dressed in black and seems to be, which would suggest a mourning type thing. And she's holding the arrow and thinking of Themyscira, and is, I would assume, thinking about the fact that they had to send a warning arrow to them. So I wonder if the next story that we get from her is going to be something that explores like where she goes from this point forward. But I don't know, because Warner Brothers seems to say, well, yeah, but Warner Brothers seems to say that Zack's storyline is not canon, so I don't think it sets up.
Yeah, I'd be
where
curious
Wonder
to
Woman
know,
goes.
like, when, because Patty Jenkins has mentioned that she already has kind of like a rough idea for Wonder Woman 3, and I'm be curious to know if it continues some of what, like, when did she have that idea? Like, was it when she was still working with Zack and Zack was still heavily involved? Like, that would be interesting.
That's the cheat, the backdoor cheat of her not having to really follow up from her prequels, because she's not going to pick up after Wonder Woman 1984.
Right.
I want to know if the Wonder Woman movies, the standalone solo movies, are eventually going to bring her up to contemporary time. You know,
I hope.
or are they going to try to throw like one more, like Wonder Woman 2000, you know, where there's like one more set in the previous time.
No.
I know.
Please no.
I know. Listen, we don't have to do that. There's plenty of stuff you can do with her contemporary, but we'll see where that goes.
So a lot of, again, Zack mentioned ends on a huge cliffhanger. There are a lot of cliffhangers.
Oh, there's like 17,
Yes.
which is okay. Like, when this happened in the Lord of the Rings movies, I hated it because it didn't. It always felt like, oh, this is the end. Oh no, we're still going. Oh, this is the end. No, we're still going. I was totally fine with this one. You know, Barry gets his job at the criminal lab, and his father's super proud of him. We see him sort of running and embracing the Speed Force. We mentioned Cyborg, how he's kind of accepting who he is. Diana, Aquaman, they're going back off on their adventures. Bruce and Clark have bought the farm. Here's a wrinkle that I still would like explored. Clark is Clark at the end of the movie, you know? But Clark is dead, as far as we know.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because there's very deliberately at the end of BVS that shot of him in the newspaper, and it's like, reporter dead. So depending on how long it actually has been since that event, like, I don't know, could you be like, just kidding, we found him? Like, I don't.
I've been under rubble this whole time.
Yeah, like, I don't know.
But I do like, okay, so we had this conversation too before we get into, well, I guess we'll do Lex's scene next, about how when Superman opens his shirt as he's running down the alley, he's wearing the black and silver. So I assume he's going to stay in the black and silver, but when we get to the Nightmare sequence, he's back in the blue and red. I'm going to try to get Zack to tell us why. Like, why he's back in the blue and red.
Yeah. And
I want the answer to that.
perhaps you might hear that on RealBlend, which, if that's the case, I will link to in the video description down below. So you can go watch it.
If it happens.
I might spill the beans about something.
Let's move on to the Lex Deathstroke meetup.
If you want the Batman, here is something that can help you. His name is Bruce Wayne.
Him telling Deathstroke, Lex telling Deathstroke that Bruce Wayne is Batman was setting up the Batman movie that Ben Affleck was going to do. And theatrical cut didn't have to do that anymore. So they reworked it to make it like...
to set up.
To put it plainly, shouldn't we have a league of our own?
No. Awful.
Yes. Yes.
This is also, I like to mention the scenes that, like, on rewatch, because I'm up to rewatch number 5 now at this point. When I'm going through it, I totally fast forward through the really
This is
lengthy...
so weird to me that you fast forward through scenes when you rewatch stuff. I've never done that. I might like check out for a little bit and be like, oh, I'm gonna go like start the dishwasher or something, but I've never like physically fast forwarded through a scene. When
Oh yeah, why check out when you can just zip forward to the next scene?
More efficient, for sure.
It's like commercials on a DVR, you know? Like, I don't need to see the guard approach Lex Luthor's cell for 5 minutes.
That's true.
I'll just jump right to the boat.
Fair.
And
I'll give you that.
Watch the two of them interact. So that is where, in a perfect world, Zack would have been able to end his movie of Lex telling Deathstroke, Slade Wilson, that Bruce is Batman. But instead we get the additional photography, which plunges us back into the Knightmare sequence. And here's where we'll touch on a lot of stuff about Vanity Fair as well, too, and what Zack was able to reveal to Anthony Bresnikan, the tremendous reporter for that newspaper article. So where do you want to begin with the Knightmare?
I want to begin with your thoughts on Jared Leto's Joker, because you were not a fan of Jared Leto's Joker prior to seeing Zack Snyder's Justice League. What were your feelings about him in Zack Snyder's Justice League?
Be very careful with the next thing you say.
My first gut reaction was I still dislike him. I still do not like his interpretation of Joker. He is my least favorite interpretation of Joker.
That's not very careful.
And multiple rewatches have not necessarily changed that opinion, but I've softened on him at least. I like the scene, and I like the idea of Batman and Joker being, having a conversation and them both sort of digging in emotionally, with Joker talking about the death of Robin and Batman mentioning that when Harley died in my arms,
She begged me with her last breath. Then when I killed you, and make no mistake, I will fucking kill you. Then I do it slow.
All of that's great. But the reach around joke sucks. It sucks. And just his line delivery is not, I don't love him as Joker. Do you? Do you like it?
I like it. I don't love it. I agree with you. Some of the line deliveries, like the way that he kind of like lingers and then like over exaggerates certain words. To me, I don't know why it just does not come off as authentic. Like I don't like, it's like, oh, I see Jared Leto acting right now. Like it just kind of takes me out of it a little bit. Like when he's like,
I'm happy to discuss with you in any way you like.
I just wish it were more like understated a little bit to kind of like match Ben Affleck's Batman's sort of like subtleties a little bit more. But I will say I enjoyed what I saw here way more than I did in the Suicide Squad.
Yes, I agree with that. I think his performance in Suicide Squad is straight bad. Straight bad. And I know that David Ayer has talked about like, oh, that's not what I wanted to get out of Joker. But like, I'm still looking at the footage. Like I'm still looking at, you could probably try to recut it in a million different ways. I still feel like the way that he's approaching Joker is just not what I expected. And people might really like it and connect with it, but I'm with you. It's all just too... There's no menace to him as the Joker. I just think he's like a buffoon. So I can't accept him as this like brilliant sort of foil to Batman kind of thing.
So as usual, I'll be the bigger man.
I love just about everybody else in the Nightmare sequence though. Like, I think that all of the other people who are on Batman's team show off a really great balance of anger for what has happened and why they're in this world. Resentment for Bruce and for them being in this universe, and fear. Like they're terrified. They do not want to run into Superman. And so when Superman shows up and but here's, let's talk about something really interesting. And this deflates a little bit of what we talked about in chapter 6 when we were discussing, 6 or 5, when we saw the first Nightmare scene in Justice League. And we were talking about that it's the fact that Barry was getting close to reversing time. Remember, because the Mother Box was coming back up? The Vanity Fair article makes it very clear that Zack is saying that it's Flash running through time that manipulates their ability. That his running through time is what opens the portals for the members to see either the future or the past.
I don't like to break this rule, but when I approach the speed of light, crazy things happen to time.
So the reason why Cyborg sees the Nightmare sequence at that moment is because Barry has accessed the Speed Force, and
but isn't it before Barry starts running?
No. Wait. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. He has not started.
Because he's like
One. This action is irreversible.
Victor? No. Go?
Maybe that's supposed to play out simultaneously.
I think it's supposed to, because Zack is saying in the Vanity Fair article that it's absolutely when Barry runs through time that alters
interesting.
things.
Yeah, that would make sense then, because that would make because we were talking about, we were a little bit confused with the miscommunication there when he was like,
Yes.
what, go, or whatever he says. So maybe, yeah, that would make sense that what we see Victor seeing is happening while Flash is running, but obviously you can't show that simultaneously.
Yes.
In the
And
end.
it also makes sense. It a little bit more explains Bruce's access to the Knightmare sequence in the first movie.
Yeah.
Because it kind of happens simultaneously, again, like you say, with Barry trying to run through time and get to Bruce and warn him in this sequence.
Oh, okay.
Now, that we don't know what Barry's running through to trigger the last Knightmare sequence, because it's just Bruce sleeping in his lakeside house. So,
Interesting.
but yes, it's Barry running through time that manipulates the introductions into the Knightmare.
That's my boy right there. Taught him nothing he knows.
Dad, you're gonna get maced again.
Oh, should we talk about this Green Lantern stuff that came up too? Because we do see a dead Green Lantern in the first Knightmare sequence, but we now know that Zack did have plans to bring a Green Lantern in. He wanted Jon Stewart, and then potentially was going to have Ryan Reynolds, Hal Jordan there in some capacity as well. So I think we have to eat crow a little bit, Sean.
No, I am not going to eat crow on this
You're
one, and
not?
I'll tell you why.
Au contraire, my little fish stick.
I'll tell you why I'm not going to. Because the people who were reporting this were saying that Ryan Reynolds is in it. And they were holding fast to the fact that he's in it. And that, like, they're just trying to negotiate whether he can shoot it or not. And this was like a month before the movie was due to come out. So I think people probably heard through the grapevine that Reynolds was being considered for it and held on, like they grabbed it and ran with, he's in it, he's in it.
Okay.
So, okay, fine. You were a little bit right that maybe people had been considered for it, but your sources were wrong in telling you that
he wasn't.
in
Okay,
it.
that's fair. Yes, I will stand by that. But I think there was a video where I was like, why would Zack even think that? Like, totally, it doesn't make sense. So I was wrong.
And it doesn't make sense. Like,
no,
it doesn't make sense. It's bad. Like, if Zack wants to include Jon Stewart, I totally understand. Like, that's fine. But the continuity of trying to bring Ryan Reynolds in as Hal Jordan doesn't make any sense. It's too distracting.
Could you imagine if you actually saw that on screen? Like, you would be completely taken out of it. You'd be like, what?
Yeah, that's not a clever cameo where you'd be like, oh, that's cool. They tied it into this existing thing.
Yeah.
I personally would be like, that's really dumb. Why did they do that?
And I wonder, like, because Zack just mentioned that it was an idea he had. So I wonder if it was one of those things where he was like, oh, that'd be cool. Oh, wait, never mind. Or if it was like a legitimate, like, hey, can we make this happen?
He says that he doesn't expand on the Ryan Reynolds portion of it, but he says that cameo, the Martian Manhunter cameo, was supposed to be Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart specifically, he says. And that Warner Brothers said to him, we have plans for Jon Stewart, and we haven't announced them yet. Please let us have that.
Where are they?
There's been talk about another Green Lantern Corps movie, because they had a script for it at one point that was supposed to be like a Lethal Weapon type buddy comedy movie, but it's like, I don't know if it's buddy comedy, but like a police type movie set in space, because the Green Lantern Corps are like intergalactic cops essentially. And so Jon Stewart was supposed to be a significant part of that. So maybe they still want to do that.
Okay.
But Zack said in their negotiations to bring all this back, there were a lot of moments where Zack says the studio wanted to really, like, he used the term cul-de-sac, like they wanted to cul-de-sac it. And so they asked, like, please don't include Green Lantern. We have other plans for that. So he agreed to switch it to Martian Manhunter. They wanted to take out the Lois pregnancy, but he worked in those scenes to keep the pregnancy test. And I think the congratulations at the farm. So that's all significant. But he did want to have Green Lantern there at the lakeside. So that's interesting. And instead it's Martian Manhunter.
Oh. Well, we can definitely use the help.
So the Martian Manhunter scene at the end, too, really quickly, does kind of try to explain why he's been absent from BVS, because a lot of people are like, if Harry Lennox has been, or General Swanwick has been Martian Manhunter all this time, like, why didn't he help out with Doomsday or any of these other things? What did you think about that clarification? Did it work for you?
More or less.
More or more less?
Probably more or less.
He said no.
He said no.
Not necessarily. I still think he should have gotten involved at other places, because all he essentially says is like,
I've realized I have a stake in this world, and it's time I started fighting for it.
Maybe Martian Manhunter's just seen so much that he's like, Superman's got Doomsday, it's fine. But then Darkseid, he's like, oh, all right, fine, I'll help you.
Maybe. But I do believe wholeheartedly that Swanwick was Martian Manhunter this whole time. Like, some people are trying to be like, are you retconning? Like, was he actually Martian Manhunter this whole time?
No.
I think that was the plan. You know, I'm not saying that Zack is kind of like, oh, there's a character who I probably could make Martian Manhunter. But now that we know for sure, I have not gone back through to watch BVS Ultimate Edition and to really pay attention to Swanwick's interactions with Lois. But I know that he does do some significant stuff to move her forward in her investigation. And now I would like to watch that with the new realization that this is
the Martian Manhunter.
Oh, well, let me ask you this, because you've now lived in the universe of like Man of Steel, BVS, and this. How do you rank them?
Oh, God.
Yeah, you like that one?
No.
You weren't ready for that.
I was not. I'm going to regret. I'm probably going to change my mind. But if I had to right now, I would go Justice League, Man of Steel, BVS.
Interesting. Interesting.
I don't know that I'm going to agree with that opinion in like an hour, but how about you?
I think I would do... I'm really torn between wanting to put BVS ahead of Justice League. But I'm pretty sure that because of the totality of all that it accomplishes, I'm putting Justice League, then BVS, Ultimate Edition, then Man of Steel.
Good boy.
So regardless, we've got a couple more videos left in us. So to make sure that you don't miss any of that, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on your notifications here on the YouTube page. On CinemaBlend, keep it locked here for all of our videos and written content as well too. We will continue to explore not just Zack Snyder's Justice League, but all the DC films that are coming, all the Marvel films that are coming, and all of your pop culture needs here at CinemaBlend.